The Oscars. A giant awards ceremony sponsored by the Hollywood elite and designed to showcase the best films of the year for the millions of people watching at home. Except, it's not at all like that in 2019. The best films of the year don't get nominated like Suspiria, or they get snubbed like First Reformed. Instead, movies like Black Panther, Vice, Bohemian Rhapsody, and A Star is Born sweep the nominations. And, what's even worse, nobody watches them anyway. In 2017, the viewership ratings for the Oscars hit an all-time low, making a 39% drop since their peak in 2014. Now, I would love to break down the 2019 Academy Awards and talk more about what went on and why I think certain things won, but everybody on YouTube already does that. So I decided to do one better. Let's take a look at the state of film as a whole in 2019. What are the trends? What's changing? Where does it look like film might be headed? How can I disguise the fact that I'm making this video before the Oscars premiere and so I can't even comment on the winners at all? Wait, did I just say that last one out loud? Oh, whatever. Let's talk about it.
Hooray for Hollywood. That's gooey bally hooly Hollywood. Where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
Because 2018 was one of the longest years on record, and so many major moments happened in the film industry, I'm going to divide this video up into segments and then combine them all at the end like a detective with some bulletin boards and a hell of a lot of string. So, how best to summarize a year that began with the Tide Pod Challenge and ended with the Bird Box Challenge?
We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along.
I want to make a disclaimer before I start talking about numbers and box office results. I'm only going to talk about US box office. And there's a really simple reason for why I'm doing that. I didn't see Operation Red Sea, Monster Hunt 2, or Detective Chinatown 2. And honestly, I think I'm missing out on that last one. Watch this.
我是个侦探，可 Ryan Master 知道吧？我在里边是有排名的。
你是侦探？就你这个样，就他妈的是侦探？
你不要瞧不起他们，为了把国路大升巨齐，我是费了大力气的。Bastard, don't run! How do you say that? 爸爸打我。爸爸打我。Good.
Honestly, I don't really feel comfortable breaking down and analyzing the worldwide film market because it includes India and China, and I have no idea how their film industries work. So, we'll stick to what I know. 2018's box office was, unsurprisingly, dominated by franchise films. Marvel took the top two slots with Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War, followed by Incredibles 2, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and Aquaman. So it's clear that 20 years into this cycle, America still loves superheroes. And dinosaurs. In fact, Marvel really knocked it out of the park this year, delivering their two top-grossing films so far. Avengers Infinity War made $55 million, more than the film just below it, Avengers Age of Ultron. And Black Panther made $700 million, making it one of the top 10 highest-grossing films of all time. In terms of revenue, it seems like Disney is really knocking it out of the park this year. At least, that's true with Marvel. Star Wars had an entirely different 2018. As one of the flagship franchises of all movie history, Star Wars has seen a bit of a downturn since The Force Awakens. With every new movie, the box office gross gets lower and lower, until finally, we hit Solo: A Star Wars Story. The public did not want to see this movie. In fact, The Force Awakens made just about the same amount in its opening weekend as Solo did in its entire theatrical run. And what's more, its domestic gross was lower than its production budget, making it an incredibly unprofitable film. And then, after its failure, Disney announced that it would be slowing down production of Star Wars films to avoid another such flop. In the world of horror, another box office change has started. Since the release of It in 2017, R-rated films have begun to make a bit of a comeback. In fact, 3 of the 5 top-grossing horror films were rated R this year, and many more high-grossers were too. Compare that with 2015 when 3 out of the 5 top-grossing horror movies were PG-13 or lower. It seems like R-rated horror is starting to make a killing again at the box office. Even Netflix have been reaching out into the theaters this year, distributing movies like The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Roma into theaters across the nation. However, not much is known about box office results because Netflix doesn't report their numbers. However, Netflix did have a whopping success with their original film Bird Box this year, with Netflix claiming, without any evidence to back it up, that over 80 million accounts watched the film in the first month of its release. I know that's a lot of numbers, so let's get into the nitty-gritty and forget all of this boring math and pointless money measuring to talk about what you're really interested in. It's clear from the box office results that franchise films are doing better than ever. In fact, they're one of the few reasons people even go to movie theaters anymore. I went and saw both Black Panther and Infinity War in the theater this year, and both screenings were absolutely packed with people. The audiences laughed at the jokes and cheered at the action. I used to think that comic book movies were only obsessed about by internet nerds, but it seems like the general public really does love them. So now here's where I come in with a needlessly contrarian take to get YouTube views. Franchise films are dying. How can I say something like that when the box office results show the opposite? Easy. Star Wars. The Star Wars films are a massively grossing franchise when they got rebooted by J.J. Abrams. In fact, The Force Awakens is the world's third highest grossing film of all time. And so Disney decided, if there's a bunch of money to be made off these movies, let's make a new one every year and market the ever-living shit out of it. If you go to a store, Star Wars stuff is everywhere. I used to think Minions were bad, but Star Wars might be even worse. But, as the years went by, box office results proved that their tactic wasn't working. Churning out new movies every year not only made audiences get bored faster, but the movies also went down in quality. Star Wars died quietly with Solo: A Star Wars Story's failure. I have yet to talk to a single person who actually saw that movie. They still haven't seen it. Nobody has. I know I haven't. And that's because there's absolutely no reason to anymore. People don't care about Star Wars. The Last Jedi, despite what your personal opinions on the film are, alienated people from the films by removing the standard hero plotline from the story and erasing the importance of the characters. Why would anyone care about a universe like this one anymore, especially when most people think the movies are bad? Okay, so Star Wars might be dead, again, but how does that affect Marvel? Well, first, let's talk about the pattern of releases for the films. I'm gonna have to use the really stupid and arbitrary naming system that Marvel's used to manipulate geeky superfans, but I won't be very happy about it. Phase 1 began in the 2000s, and movies were spread out throughout the years. There wasn't a new Marvel movie every year. People had to wait for sequels. I'm not saying that the films ended on cliffhangers or left the audience wondering about the next film, but they still had to wait. And then, the Avengers came. It was the last movie in Phase 1, and the film's post-credit scene teased at Thanos coming, with the Infinity Gauntlet, to destroy the world. Phase 2 brought more of the same, introducing a few new characters and bringing back others, but this time it seemed like the movies were coming together and building to something. People were waiting for Thanos. With every new movie, fan predictions and analysis spread out about what would happen next. In Phase 2, there were 2 new Marvel movies a year. Production had increased and wait periods for the next film had shortened, but fans didn't care. They already had something to look forward to, Thanos. Then we hit Phase 3. Suddenly we're getting 3 Marvel movies a year, and these ones are huge successes helmed by creative directors and unique visions, delivering fantastical scripts and new takes on superhero films. There's Spider-Man Homecoming, a closer to the comics view of Spider-Man as an awkward teenager. There's Thor Ragnarok, a technicolor, rock and roll infused magical playground. Then, there's Black Panther, a superhero world where people of color hold roles of power and influence helmed by a black director. It seemed like the Marvel Universe was at its peak after over a decade of film production. But here's where I think the troubles begin. People get excited for Marvel movies for 2 reasons. They're excited about the characters, or they're excited to see what's going to happen in the main plot arc. And, with this huge roster of characters that people really care about, like Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Black Panther, and Spider-Man, Disney is still trying to crank out more. Marvel has made 2 Ant-Man movies, both of which were generally ignored by moviegoers. When do we reach the tipping point and just stop caring about these character movies like we did with Star Wars? Why does Marvel keep introducing more and more characters into a universe that seems like its entire plan and heart is built around characters that have already been developed? Is it to make more action figures? The second part of my problem is this. The MCU is reaching its climax. Since 2012, Marvel has been teasing Thanos as the main villain and plot arc for the Avengers. Every movie has been building to this moment. After watching Infinity War, it's clear that Marvel did have a plan for the characters it was introducing in Phase 1 and 2, and that plan was Thanos. And, with Avengers Endgame seated for 2019, that plan is going to be coming to an end. Once the Avengers defeat Thanos, and we all know that they will, what will be left to do with the MCU? What will be the reason to care? Just like with the Star Wars universe, the momentum will fizzle out because it feels like there's nowhere left to go. Doubtlessly, the actors themselves are going to get tired of doing superhero movies. Chris Hemsworth is 35 years old, Chris Evans is 37, and Robert Downey Jr.? He's 53. They can't keep doing action movies forever or they'll all end up like Clint Eastwood. So, yeah, I think the Marvel movies are going to begin their decline starting in 2019. I think Captain Marvel is going to be a decent movie, and it's going to get hyped up for representing women in a positive light despite regressive social stances just like Wonder Woman. Plus, it seems like it's riding this 80s nostalgia wave that kind of felt played out when It premiered in 2017. Marvel can't keep releasing new characters at this point in the game because there'll be no reason to care anymore. There's nothing left to build up to with Thanos gone. And then, when the actors decide to retire, they'll have to reboot their characters to explain the new actors. And that's when they'll really jump the shark. In all honesty, I don't have that much of a problem with franchise films. I know that they eat up the industry and they take money away from other movies and theaters, and they've corrupted film audiences into some kind of weird hype machine willing to consume any product thrown their way and... oh. Maybe they aren't so great after all. But I'm not worried, because there's no way that these big franchise films can last forever. Year after year, we've seen proof of studio executives losing touch with audiences and making terrible films. And Star Wars is more proof of that than any other franchise. So I'm going to leave you with this last thought. Star Wars and Marvel are both owned by Disney. There. I said it. Ruminate on that. It's impossible to talk about the state of film in 2019 without mentioning streaming. Netflix had a movie nominated for Best Picture this year, a movie made by a well-known and established director. More and more established creators are turning to Netflix to get movies made. Alfonso Cuarón, the Coen brothers, Brian Fogel, Yancey Ford, Cary Joji Fukunaga, even Guillermo del Toro has announced an upcoming Netflix collaboration. In 2019, it seems like Netflix is just as viable of a place to get films made as the studio system. But why? Netflix gives creators free reign. And yeah, that means a lot of crap gets made, cough cough, A Christmas Prince, but it also means that quality directors get to make films in a moment where it seems like big studios only want to make multi-million-dollar franchise movies. And why can it do this? Because everyone has a Netflix account. The service is quickly approaching 150 million paying users. Just in the last 3 months of 2018, it gained a whopping 9 million users, and Netflix says it expects to gain another 8.9 million by March of 2019. And that's only counting the people who actually pay for the service, and not all of the people who piggyback on their friends' accounts without paying. It's impossible to ignore the fact that Netflix is beating out theaters in terms of viewership. And, on top of that, it's cheaper to distribute a film through Netflix than to put it into theaters. So the only movies that you can actually go to a movieplex and see are the giant mega blockbusters, horror movies, and the Oscar nominees. That's what's economically feasible for the studios to put out there. Sure, there's art house theaters and limited run films, but they have way lower viewing attendances than the movieplexes do. So, Netflix, who already has a streaming platform set up and relies on users who already own their own devices with screens and an internet connection capable of streaming video, gets to spend virtually nothing on distribution. Putting a movie on Netflix has very little risk because Netflix has so little to lose. Sure, there's the production budget, but with the sheer amount of users, it's likely that even the most mediocre Netflix film could get tons of views, cough cough, Bird Box. Netflix can afford to make any movies it wants to. But what does that mean for artists? Well, it means that they can make the movies they want to without interference from studio executives. It means they can experiment. Roma is Alfonso Cuarón's first movie since Gravity, which is the very definition of a studio blockbuster. But now, because of Netflix's funding and willingness to give creators a voice, he was able to make a film that is widely regarded as one of the best movies of the last decade. And it doesn't stop with Netflix either. Amazon Studios also funded some amazing films in 2018, including You Were Never Really Here, Don't Worry He Won't Get Far on Foot, and even Suspiria. In 2018, a majority of the movies that received critical acclaim were produced by streaming sites and not big studios. Tides are turning away from movie theaters and towards home streaming. What's the point of going to a theater when dozens of critically acclaimed and original movies can be watched from your couch? Why spend money to buy a movie ticket for a film that's available on a service you already have a subscription to? The tides of the movie industry are changing, and it was never more clear than in 2018. Movie studios are struggling to reach their audiences and can only get butts in seats for giant franchise films that, at least in my view, are dying out. But streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon are raking in the dough, all while funding independent art films. And now Disney is building their own streaming service, further erasing the need to go to an actual theater to see the latest Marvel or Star Wars film. I'm not sure when, but movie theaters are going to die out, replaced by streaming services. This may be sad to the film buffs who want to go see 70mm prints projected on a big screen, but not for the general public. 2019 and the new decade of the 2020s will be the dawn of a new era of how we consume media, and I don't know how to feel about that. I mentioned in the previous section that independent, artistic, and creator-driven films have been becoming more common thanks to streaming services like Netflix and Amazon. And I think that we're seeing the beginning of a new trend in American cinema. For the past 20 years, the American film landscape has been dominated by major studio releases and blockbuster cycles. In the early 2000s, we were hit with a string of teen sex comedies. Then, there was the string of parody movies. Then we had disaster movies. And then we had a revival of body horror, and we followed that up with the supernatural and possession cycle, and then we got flooded by remakes and reboots. And now, we're chin deep in the tidal wave of superhero movies. But throughout all of those trends, something's beginning to surface again. Interest in directors over actors. People go to see movies because they like the director. People have been making jokes about Michael Bay for years because everyone knows his specific style and presence as a schlock auteur. Christopher Nolan's entire career as of late has been built on name recognition. People flock to movies like A Wrinkle in Time because they know the name of the director. And in the past few years, we've been seeing a surge in this trend. Split, Get Out, Baby Driver, Wonder Woman, Dunkirk, Detroit, Lady Bird, Blade Runner 2049, The Florida Project, Thor Ragnarok, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Justice League, Call Me By Your Name, The Shape of Water, Star Wars The Last Jedi, Phantom Thread, The Post, All the Money in the World, 1517 to Paris, Black Panther, Annihilation, A Wrinkle in Time, Isle of Dogs, Unsane, Ready Player One, A Quiet Place, First Reformed, 8th Grade, Don't Worry You Won't Get Far on Foot, Black Klansman, The Predator, The House of the Clock on Its Walls, Fahrenheit 11/9, A Star is Born, Halloween, Mid-90s, Suspiria, Roma, The Favorite, The Mule, If Beale Street Could Talk, Aquaman, and Vice are all auteur's pictures solely for the fact that the main topic of interest that sold these movies was the creative force behind them. And they're all from the last 2 years. They were advertised using the creator's name, recognized as products of a creator, and even with movies like Justice League, where the director's vision was altered by a studio interference was seen as a bad thing, and a majority of the public demanded a purer form of authorial expression. Release the Snyder Cut! Auteurism does not have to be completely outside of the studio system either. A majority of film historians consider directors like John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock, and Howard Hawks, and many others, to be auteur directors, despite working within the studio system for most of their careers. I don't think many people would argue that directors like Steven Spielberg and Michael Bay don't have a distinctive style that carries through all of their movies. But now, at the beginning of the transition to the 2020s, we're beginning to see an increased interest in these auteurist ideals. People talk about their favorite directors and get excited to see a movie by a director they like. People get angry about the representation of people of color and women in the film history, and that usually takes the form of a more diversified list of directors. And now that streaming giants are beginning to fund more auteurist films, I think we're going to see a surge in these kind of movies soon. There's a new wave of auteur directors rising to the forefront, too. Yorgos Lanthimos, Alfonso Cuarón, Denis Villeneuve, Claire Denis, Barry Jenkins, Luca Guadagnino, Greta Gerwig, Cary Joji Fukunaga, and many others that I don't want to ignore but can't think of at the moment I'm writing this. This new generation of filmmakers hasn't been fully recognized yet, but in the next few years, there's gotta be some attention thrown their way. We can't keep ignoring the surge of auteurism in the current environment. And when the franchise films finally begin to jump the shark and studios start floundering, I think we're going to see a lot more auteurist films. The film climate now reminds me a lot of the mid-1960s, where star power was running out and studios were losing the picture. And then, in the 1970s, American film saw an auteur renaissance. Will the 2020s be the same? Well, I can't say anything for sure, but I think it certainly looks like it. At least, I hope so. So, what can I say about the state of film in 2019? Well, I think I've already said it. But really, I think it's more interesting to tell you why I said it. First of all, I wanted to make a video that was a bit more optimistic about what's in store for us. I think that most film buffs, including myself, look at the movies coming out and think, wow, we're in a time of crap movies. Honestly, I thought that 2018 was a pretty forgettable year for cinema compared to 2017. The number of movies of sheer quality that came out in 2017 was very high. But then I think a little deeper. 2018 wasn't actually that bad for film at all. But the problem is, nobody really talked about it. Nobody talked about 8th Grade or Roma or First Reformed because we were all too busy complaining about why Black Panther was getting so overhyped or how stupid the idea for Solo was. In the age of the internet, people crave vitriol, and it creates this vortex of negativity that becomes limiting for criticism as a whole. People don't make reviews or retrospectives about classic cinema or art house films because they want to get views by being mad at something. And I think that's sad, especially at a time when the new wave of film criticism is almost entirely made and consumed on YouTube. CinemaSins is the most popular film review channel because it's focused on why big blockbusters suck. But why doesn't anybody want to fill the giant gaping void of actually talking about art films or looking at the big picture? I'm sure someone will say something about yourmoviesucks.org because he does cover art films occasionally, and he hosts a podcast alongside Ralph the Movie Maker and I Hate Everything to talk about art films and current media trends. But then I would respond, look at the title of their channels. Your Movie Sucks. I Hate Everything. I'm not saying anything bad about these channels because I'm a subscriber and watch them regularly, but I do really think that the film critics of today need to start acting proactively if they want to promote good cinema. Sure, it's one thing to tell people that a movie is bad, but it doesn't do much if people are going to see it anyway, especially if they want to see it because it's terrible. Making a recommendation about a movie that people might not see is more important than a bad review, in my opinion. Then maybe we can start pushing that auteurist revival forward. Now that's my tirade over. The second reason I wanted to make this video is because, post-Oscar videos are popular and I want the views. So yeah, fuck the Oscars.
You're boring. You're rambling on, no end in sight.
You're boring.
No need to thank your parakeet. You're boring.
Look at Catherine Zeta-Jones.
She's snoring. You could have rushed up to the stage, but you were lollygagging.
They're turning off your microphone and cutting to a commercial for Delta.